Happy Halloween, everybody, or in this case, happy All Hallows Eve. I don't know if that's a thing that people still say, but that's a thing that definitely needs to be brought back. We are here for our annual Halloween Spooktacular episode. We didn't really get a chance to do a Shocktober this year just because of everything that's been going on in our lives, but Chris is here in his October-looking flannel. I am here in my shitty discount knockoff superhero outfit, which I think perfectly reflects just our personalities and takes on this holiday. Chris, I'm so happy to have you here, man. This is a special episode for both of us, to say the least. You know, Halloween, Shocktober has been such a big part of this podcast since we started it way back in the day. You excited, man?
Of course, man. Yeah, like you said, we couldn't do a big extravagant thing like we've done in the past this year, but at the very least, we owed it to you guys ourselves and just had to have some fun on this All Hallows Eve, as you say, which I think, even though it is the Catholic holiday, it's a little spookier than just saying Halloween. I don't know.
I agree with that entirely. So, with all of that being said, we'll see you guys on the other side on another episode of the Talking TV podcast. All right, if that's not
StreamYard strikes again.
I'm like, so wait, was that you or was that StreamYard?
Well, it was StreamYard is very sensitive. Let's put it that way. You can hover over something.
Oh, you hovered over it.
The not even click trick. It, but it thinks you clicked it, and all hell breaks loose.
The old hovering trick. Oh man, I was wondering because I'm like,
yeah.
I mean, again, we haven't had one of those goof ups in a while, so.
The ghost of StreamYard strikes again. And, maybe that's me just not wanting to accept my ring rust here, being a switcher. But it is what it is. Anyways, what's up, guys? Welcome. Happy Halloween, Dom.
Yeah, happy Halloween, Chris.
Yeah. Dude, how you been?
I've been good, man. I've been good. Just got back from upstate. Was having a very much needed getaway weekend before, like you said, the intense weekend begins. Like I said, we got elections coming up. I'm in the second half of my semester now, so we're really getting into the thick of things. But we're still not stopping. Like I said, we still got a bunch of good episodes to hold you guys over until the end of the year. It's been a busy year for us. It's been a big year of change for us. So I kind of wanted to start this episode off there, talking about Halloween, kind of how a lot of things have changed in our life since, obviously, we started the podcast, kind of, the pandemic giving us that extra boost that we needed, and then coming out of it. Like last year we were kind of sort of coming out of it, but this year, like, we really came out of it as far as like real life really coming back to like give us a good kick in the ass as far as just being like, hey, gotta get stuff going again. So I wanted to know, first and foremost, first off, what did you end up doing this past weekend for Halloween weekend? Can we just talk about that real quick? Like how Halloween is now kind of spread to encompass like Halloween weekend, and there are people that like come up with like multiple costumes for like different stuff now. Like that's all new to me because me, I have no social life. I pretty much like I work and then I'm just living online 24/7. So all these new fads and trends that pop up, they're always new and fascinating to me. But you have your ear a little bit more to the ground as far as the culture goes. So maybe you could inform me as far as like why that is.
Sure. I mean, I just think it's, capitalism, man. I think it's, if there's a way to make money off of something, we're going to do it. We're going to figure that out. And I got to say, I think, my friends, a bunch of my friends in Los Angeles and whatnot, they go crazy out there for Halloween. I mean, it's a lot of like actors, people who are aspiring to be actors. And I mean, dude, they start like Wednesday night. Like last Wednesday night, I know for a fact, one of my friends, Tyler, and his girlfriend, who's actually an actress herself, they were like, costume set number 1, this is the warm-up. Thursday night, costume set number 2, they're like on their 5th costume now. But I think it's just because any excuse to have fun is good. I think we work way too much as a society, and I'm all for working hard. But I also think we need time to rest and recuperate. And I think Halloween, the holidays, and what Halloween's turned into gives us a fun excuse just to kind of let loose, go hang out with your old friends up in college. What I did, you asked me, I went out to, not to fully give away the area, but our area has a legendary haunted house. Dom and I went once.
Yes.
And
we did.
I went out to that with my girlfriend. We had a lot of fun. It was the 40th anniversary of this place, so they brought all the scares, all the spooks out. It was a lot of fun. Yesterday night, I went to a good old costume party. Pirate Chris made his return.
Pirate Chris made his comeback.
Just popped by for a little bit. I was tired, but I told someone I'd be there, so I went. And other than that, man, today played a little bit of a gig outside at a winery, very fall, very festive, wore this flannel. So I was glad you said looking seasonal, because the reason I wore this flannel was to look a little festive, because they said, hey, wear fall colors, but just making the most of it. The leaves are changing. It's going to be cold soon. So I've just been sort of soaking up the fun and the last bit of warmth while I can. And I think
Yeah.
that's why Halloween has become such a big deal, because it's like we're heading into the winter soon. It's the holidays. It's the end of the year. It's a transitionary time. Let's have our last bit of fun on the year before
Yeah.
it all changes and we do it again.
Yeah, it's funny because I see all those memes and circulating around where it's like, oh, October 31st, Halloween, November 1st, getting ready for Christmas. And it's like that is it's one of those things where it's like that is a joke and it's really funny, but it's also kind of true because you know my stance on humor, right? I believe that all humor is just a facade for people being able to actually tell the truth because people are incapable of doing that. And the more that I realize that it's like, yeah, that's why
Yeah.
that is why people are always just like in such a struggle to get all those spooky festivities out of their system before, the cold, miserable, dreary months of November and December bring on. Like I love Thanksgiving and Christmas as much as the next person, but it's like, yeah, there is something really special about Halloween. And like, I don't know, like ever since I kind of made my transition into the real world, and I've just wanted to leave the rest of society behind and just live my entire life online. I don't know, like it's, you know me, like going out to Halloween parties has never been what it's about for me. So, and so then, and Matt, and just me being me, it's like, yeah, I have a hard enough time coming up with just one costume. So how the hell people are able to get the time and money in order to come up with 4 or 5 costumes, like, is baffling to me. Like, that's just one of those things where I'm like, damn, like I
Well,
get
do you
like
dress
having
up?
the last couple of years, let's call it making an attempt to dress up. It really is dependent on what time I have. I honestly, for the life of me, I can't remember what I did last year or what I dressed up as, but that's kind of understandably so. This year, again, I was just trying to hang out with my guys. I threw on an undershirt and a beanie, and everyone was like, oh shit, B-Rabbit from 8 Mile. And I'm like, you know what? That works. I'll go with it. So at this point, it's kind of like just a matter of like with how busy I am. It's just a matter of whatever I can put together in the last minute, It's kind of
Yeah, for
become what
sure. See, here's
Halloween.
what I do. I buy like a somewhat costly costume and I wear it into the ground. So I think I
Yeah.
dropped like 60 to 80 on a pirate costume like 5 years ago now, and I'm getting runway on this. It
Yeah.
does it serves a lot of purposes. One, you're always able to be picked out when you're running with your crew on Halloween, especially if you go out to like something and there's like a bunch of people around. It's good. You're known. Oh yeah, okay, cool. There's Chris, the pirate. Got it. I know that costume. The second thing it does, it kind of keeps you like, I got to fit into this thing next year, Maybe I got to be a little relaxed when it comes to this, that, and the other thing, keep my workout routine up. And the third thing, you're only spending money once every 4 to 5 years, and
That's
that
fair.
is a
That's
great
fair.
thing.
See,
That's probably the best part about it.
why that never worked for me? Because my whole stance is, and this is from when I was a kid too. I remember because me, like I said, for me, Halloween was always trick or treating. That was Halloween, getting free candy and dressing up. That was Halloween to me. Like I said, I had a little bit of a rough transition into the whole, going to Halloween parties and all this like multiple costume phase craziness. So my whole thing was, I'm like, you only get to dress up once a year, because it's like you only get this one night a year. At least that's how I knew it growing up. So you got to go with something different every year, So, but it was recently then, obviously, once money came into it, that's when it's like, oh, okay, now I gotta start spending. So the last couple of years, I will say I've been getting a lot of mileage out of my Rorschach costume, which is, again, my whole thing is I'm like cheap and easy to put together, a leather, an overcoat, some gloves, a fedora, maybe a scarf or two, and then the Rorschach mask, which I think cost me like at the time like 15 or 20 bucks on Amazon for a good one, and that was it. And it worked for the last couple of years. And then there was the year that I was Walter White for Breaking Bad. So yeah, so that's kind of become my stance on like being as
The
economical
buzzed
as
head look.
possible. The buzzed head look, exactly. Of course, like I said,
Yeah.
I mean, I even did the discount Rorschach for our Halloween for our Halloween watch on Halloween 2020, and then went to after that proceeded to go to probably the craziest Halloween party of my life, which leads me into, I know we've
Which,
talked
but,
about
but
this
hold on,
before.
time out. Which is
Yeah,
still
yeah.
one of the most legendary things we've hosted on the
That
channel
was,
here.
I still can't believe that we did that. That was nuts. The 2020, I mean, rest in
Yeah,
peace 2020 for all the awfulness that came out of that year. The shit that we were able to pull off on this channel during that year. The Halloween Spooktacular, the first time watch, the Duel of the Fates script read, all the debates that we did. Man, we had some good times back then, man.
definitely, man. You guys got to go back and watch that Halloween
Yeah.
2020
Definitely,
live
definitely
watch
gonna have
along.
to, drop a link to that in the bio because that video still does not get nearly the love and appreciation that it gets. I was in character that whole time. That whole
You
time.
were.
How did I do that?
It was
I can't even.
phenomenal. It was
I don't even have the
hilarious.
energy. I don't even have the energy to
Um,
stay in character for like 20 minutes now, let alone a full however long, like at what, hour 40 plus, because the before and after of actually watching the movie.
back when watch-alongs were a thing too.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, before we jump into what you wanted to say real quick, while we're still on the greater theme of just Halloween and sort of what it means to us, Halloween was something I didn't really care too much about until I became like in my 20s, and then especially doing this podcast, getting into movies and then having so much fun. It seemed like the stars kind of aligned that first October. There was like a lot of scary movies in the theater, and we kind of like made the most of it on the podcast. And so this podcast is a big reason as to why like I've become such a Halloween lover. So it's pretty cool.
Interesting.
Shocktober and everything we've done
Yeah.
has just really grown a love for a genre that I was quite literally terrified of as a young kid and didn't really have any interest in kind of in my early adulthood, but now I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. So
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, it's I've obviously also just developed a gigantic appreciation for horror movies as well that I would not say that I had before like 2016, 2017, where I started watching movies like Don't Breathe and Get Out and Split and understood that horror movies were not just about like being cheap and being scared. It was about like actually having some again, it's what we were talking about, the Blumhouse model that we were talking about a couple weeks ago on Halloween Ends. Again, high concept, low budget, and those two things, if you ask me, are like the two crucial ingredients that are needed in order to make a movie like really good and really interesting. So uh yeah,
totally, man.
yeah. So what I was gonna kind of transition that into next was probably what year would you say was the best Halloween costume for you easily? I know you've been you rocking the pirate thing a while, but like there has to be like one standout year where you were like, yeah, this costume, because there was an extra little bit of a story behind it. So I want to hear that from you, and then I'll tell mine. I think I've told it on this podcast before, but
Sure. So, well, it's still a pirate. I've done two variations of a pirate. When I was younger, um, middle high school to I want to say mid high school to I think maybe that second year of college, I had such a hardcore pirate costume. I mean, this costume I had pieced together little bits over the course of I don't know. I think 3 4 years. I had the hook, I had the peg leg, I had the hat, the jacket. I had gotten these pants off of Etsy that were like these old kind of like Jack Sparrow pants, really. The poofy legs and like the hooks for no reason and the circle holes in the pant for no reason. It was very authentic. And I remember going to a party and we were at my friend Ricky's house, and my friend
oh,
Ricky
is this the one I think
was
you're talking about?
he threw amazing Halloween parties. This kid was pretty much the Ferris Bueller of my area, our area, Dom. You were just a little too young. He really, it was like his parents left him alone too many times throughout the year because they just had the money to vacation whenever and wherever they wanted. So Ricky was left home alone in a house with 3 pool tables, a movie theater,
Oh
4, I
no.
think, arcade games, a
Oh
ping
no.
pong table, and 3 pool tables because his dad ran quite literally a pool league out of his basement, and did business deals and whatever down there.
Oh man.
They had a wine cellar. This guy was loaded, and he was one of
Yeah.
my best friends at the time. Still a great guy. We lost touch a little bit, but he was absolutely crushing it in life and threw these nuts Halloween parties. And there was one time where it just got too out of hand. I mean, he was like a 19-year-old kid with like 200 people at his house. There was like hour-long waits for pong games, but like everyone was respectful, and that was the cool part about it. The neighbors didn't care. The only reason that the cops inevitably came, because they always do, is just because they're just patrolling and his house isn't it's not secluded. It's like,
It's very
okay,
obvious
we're
out
gonna
there
have
in
to
the
see
open.
why there's this many cars outside of this house, because this is a little ridiculous. We're doing our civic duty as officers here to check in, but no one got in trouble. Everyone was asked to leave who wasn't sleeping there that night, and so yeah. But then again, there was like still 50 people sleeping there, so we still had a fun time after everyone left. But I remember people were trying to find me, and my nickname had become Pegleg. And so because I was doing the walk, the limp walk, like all over the place, and it was just absolutely legendary. I had random people just taking photos with me, and at the time, I was in a band that was pretty popular too, and I had never had anyone ask to take a photo with me, and it just like was hilarious that this is the thing that I'm getting like the star treatment for. And so it was great because no one ever lost sight of where I was, which is awesome because people want to find you for something crazy that's happening at the moment that they want you to go see. Well, Chris was easy to access and easy to find. So it was just one of the most legendary Halloween parties. And I think Ricky loved doing the dress up thing so much that when his parents went away on their January vacation, he would do Gatsby parties where everyone
Oh
would dress up
wow,
nice and fancy. And it was the same thing. We were just in suits and ties.
wow, this
And,
kid went all out, didn't he?
he did, and I think he also works on HBO now. So
There you
seems like
go.
dressing up and as a producer. So it seems like
Whoa.
planning big events has always been in his blood.
Indeed,
So
indeed. It
yeah,
looks like
yeah,
he was always meant to do that, you know. And I'm sure having connected parents didn't hurt either, but because
of
we all know
course,
how that works. But anyways, yeah. Oh man, you just made that like a tough act to sell, a tough
sorry.
act to follow. But I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna do my best. So obviously, again, there's a story that I always go to, which is of course senior year orchestra concert. We always have our big Halloween haunt concert that we had, you know, dress up, and the theme for senior year was the conductor was going to be Cruella de Vil, and we were all going to be the Dalmatians. And I was like, I just finished watching Breaking Bad at the time though, and I'm like, I did not plan out for this entire year to be Walter White, only to dress up as a fucking Dalmatian. No shot. So what did I do? That concert, everyone comes on the stage, everyone is dressed as Dalmatian except for me, the one bass player who's dressed like a middle-aged suburban dad with a shaved head and a fucking fedora on. It was the most. I stood out like a sore thumb, and it was the most legendary event of my night, of my life, at least the first time. Then there was Halloween 2019, right? No. Was that 2019 or 2016? Might have been 2016. I got my years mixed up a lot. Yeah, it was 2016, where I believe that was my first Halloween that I went to the Chance when they were, you know what I'm talking about, right? Whenever they would have the
Yeah, of
big
course,
Halloween
man. I used
concerts,
to
the
work
Chance.
there.
Yeah. Fun fact, did you know that the Chance has apparently they've been trying to sell it for like 10 years now or something like that, and they
I
still haven't been
I
able
have
to?
known that. Yeah, I
we,
have
we,
known
weird
that.
stuff, weird stuff. But yeah, so I went to this one concert with a friend of mine. I don't know if you remember him, this guy Connor that I was friends with at the time, and
Yeah, of course.
yeah,
You made a
I don't
short
remember
film.
exactly. Yeah, I don't remember the mask that he had, but he had a mask on, and I just told him to get up on stage, and I'm like, yo, and he danced with the band for like an hour long. I still can't believe how I was able to get him to do that, because this kid never does anything like that. Good dude. I kind of miss him. And then um but probably the two most fun stories. So, Halloween. Here's the only problem. Like I said, I can't remember a single thing from Halloween 2021, like at all. But it was one of those things where it's like it's gonna come back to me at some point, but it's gonna be like way in the future. So I'm not gonna try and remember it at the podcast. So for me, I'll recount the two most recent, just craziest Halloween stories, which is Halloween 2020 after we get done recording the Halloween first time watch, and then this past weekend. So Halloween 2020, I get done. What's it called? We get done recording the Halloween Spooktacular. And you know me, I was sitting in your house, I'm waiting, and I'm waiting for my one friend to get me the address for this one Halloween party, because I was working at the Gap at the time, and it was 2020, everybody was in lockdown, but at that point, it was in the fall. People were starting to get a little bit sick of getting cooped up in their houses all the time. And we were like, okay, and I was chilling with a couple of my friends from the Gap, and we were at Buffalo Wild Wings, and where they also worked as well. And one of their friends was this hot ass waitress, came over and was like, oh, I was like, yeah, you guys coming to the party? And I'm like, party? What is this? And they're like, oh yeah, can he come? I don't even think I asked if I can come or anything, but they just said, oh yeah, he can come, sure. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I text them, I got the address of the party, and I showed up. And this was one of those things where, again, not kind of similar to yours, just loaded party. Like everyone, there was people in every single level of the house, people playing Pong games. I had my Rorschach costume that I was dressed up as, but it was just so much for me to take in. My friend showed up later. You had acid laced punch. It was nuts. It was an absolutely crazy affair. One of the craziest parties I've ever been to. And my one friend, who hadn't done any sort of drugs in a while, drank some of the punch without realizing that it was acid laced. And I ended up driving him home later on before I went back to the party, and he was just going out of his mind, just losing it in my backseat. I'm like, dude, you gotta calm down. But it was just hilarious watching him do it. So that was one thing. And then I ended up passing out at the house. I woke up the next morning. I took the day off from work, and I'm like, this was one of the craziest experiences and nights of my life. So there was that. I ended up running into a couple people from high school, but they didn't remember me, so it all worked out. Which is always the best for me. And it's why. And so, but then this past weekend, let's just say that this past weekend, so we had 2 days in a row. I went upstate. I left the city on Friday. I got up there Friday night. Was chilling with my one group of friends, And that night, I apparently got so drunk that I was what's called, there was one point where I was supposed to make a speech at some point, but I was so incoherent that they literally just told me to get off because I'm like, I don't know what I'm saying at this point. And that happened. And then last night we were at a costume party for what's called, for one of my best friend's girlfriends. And like I said, I had no costume plan. I had this shirt and I had an undershirt. I'm like, I've got nothing planned, like at all. So I threw on my other pair of sweatpants. I'm like, screw it. Threw on my undershirt, threw on my beanie. I think I've got it over there somewhere. I'm not going to reach over, in order to preserve audio quality. And literally I walked, because the whole thing, and the reason why is because last year when I was living upstate, the biggest thing was it was always freezing cold. So I would always be in sweatshirts, sweatpants, hoodies, stuff like that. And I would always have my beanie on. And they all said that I looked like B-Rabbit, Eminem's character from 8 Mile. And they would call me that nonstop. They'd just be like, hey, what up, B-Rabbit? And so this year I decided to own it, because I'm like, screw it. If that's what they're gonna see me as. So I just threw on the undershirt, the beanie, and everybody of my friends immediately got it. But then there were a bunch of other people who were like, oh, who are you supposed to be? And I'm like, take a guess. Who's the most famous? I'm like, who's the most famous white rapper you know? And they're like, Eminem. And they're like, whoa. And it like blew their minds. And I'm like, wow, if that doesn't show that there is complexity and simplicity and last minute decision making, then I don't know what else to say in order to prove my point. I think I ended up getting like 3 girls' Snapchats and numbers. There was a lot that I don't remember at the bar, but all I remember too is waking up in my friend's couch this morning, getting a text from this one girl who I was friends with and who I knew from back in the day. Was like, hey, were you hitting on me last night? And I'm like, honestly, it's entirely possible. There was a lot of stuff that I just don't remember. So yeah, that was my Halloween experience for this year. And honestly, I got to say, it was fun. It was really, really great seeing my friends again. Shout out to all the homies up at Oswego. It's been too long. I'll try and make it up again at some point. But yeah, it was a fun time this past weekend. And, I'm going to remember last year's thing soon. I cannot, like I said, I cannot remember it for the life of me, but I'm going to remember last year's at some point soon. So yeah.
Well, I gotta say, man, it is fun getting out there in person around this time of year.
It really is.
But
It really
I think
is.
we'd be remiss to not speak about some things we've been watching in the scary realm,
Absolutely.
considering this is a TV and movie podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. And unfortunately, I got to lead off with this by saying I have not gotten a chance to watch anything spooky yet. However, just in order to give you guys a pretext. So I don't know if you guys have been keeping track of the Talking TV TikTok. I haven't been as active on there as usual, but I did record my top 10 favorite horror movies. I've been able to put out 3 so far on the channel, and I'm planning on getting them all out at some point tomorrow. Because as we know, after Monday, spooky stuff just immediately ends. It like evaporates out of the ethos. So I gotta get them all out. But stay tuned for the next 7 entries for the top 10 my top 10 favorite scary movies on the Talking TV TikTok. But Chris, real quick, I wanted to know, so what have you been watching for spooky season so far?
Yeah, so we're both really busy right now, so I necessarily haven't had the time to watch any series, but I've been kind of trying to make the most of every second of free time I have, and something I've always wanted to do was watch the horror classics. What provided us with what do the titans of today, what shoulders do they stand on? And so I've been doing that. I watched The Wolfman, I watched Dracula, I watched Frankenstein, and I gotta say, man, clearly they're black and white, clearly they're from the 30s and 40s, but really solid stuff. I mean,
They're good.
my favorite of the 3 was Wolfman, but they're all phenomenal. They're all just so, you can see the influence. You can see, for example, I watched Wolfman, then I went and watched American Werewolf in London, and which is such a great movie. But you can see like why history matters, why artists who aspire to be great can't unless they know their history, is rather what I should have said. Because there's so much of the Wolfman in American Werewolf of London. In fact, he needed to thoroughly understand the rules established by that movie to then break them in the way that he does. And obviously what he does is sort of show the transition in a more gruesome way, right? It's not just that quick jump cut. He shows the pain of transitioning into the werewolf. And he has the love story, which Wolfman has, but he adds a little more grit and a little more dirt. But obviously he can't do that unless he knows the classic film, which there's so much of the 1941 Wolfman in that movie. And 1941's Wolfman in and of itself, not only does it establish the rules of werewolves in modern cinema, it does such a great job of creating a 3-dimensional movie. It's not just for the scare. It's not just for the thrill, because they couldn't really do that back then, obviously. So What did they have to do? They had to pull you into the narrative. The dialogue really is what's scary. It's almost like listening to a radio play, except it's visual. But there's not going to be any crazy special effects like we see today, obviously. But what there is a very endearing love triangle. There is these characters that are so fleshed out. The movie's only 1 hour and 10 minutes. Dracula is only 1 hour. Frankenstein's like 120. It's the longest of the three. But these are all relatively quick watches, but they're so rich in depth and narrative and character development. And it really gives you an appreciation because it makes the good horror films that we love, like The Thing, and in my opinion, the original Halloween, and one of my new favorites, American Werewolf in London. Like it just like gives you an appreciation for them because there's so many nods to like classic, iconic storytelling that came before it. And I'm really glad I went back and saw those old classics and finally have added them to my repertoire because it just kind of just gives me a whole new appreciation for horror movies and why we celebrate them, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I watched all those movies back. I want to say that was junior year of college for me. I remember like October of 2017. I remember me and Connor, we were sitting down. We watched the original black and white Frankenstein, the original black and white Dracula, the original Wolfman. And it's kind of amazing to me, honestly, how much depth and pathos they're able to put into those movies that essentially are, for lack of a better word, like one-off specials. I mean, you could see the influences in Marvel's latest product that they put on Disney Plus, which I've heard is actually really spectacular. There that
Right. I
Werewolf
want to
by
watch
Night thing
that.
they put on there, where again, it's like, which supposedly they've said that that's going to be the approach they're going to take with a lot of their future Disney Plus stuff, which honestly, if that's the case, good for them because it's been much needed, where rather than torturing us with these 6 to 9 episode slogs, they're just going to concentrate it all and put it into these 1 hour long specials. And honestly, I'm all for it because again, you don't need all this time in order to make your story work. You said what? Hour 10 for Werewolf and Dracula, and those two movies are the basis for every single bit of modern day, like kind of, for lack of a better word, monster rules. Like the silver that kills werewolves. The fact that the infection has to be passed by bite, the full moon lore. Same thing with vampires. The idea of having to drink blood, how you transform other people into vampires, all of that stuff. It's all kind of, but it's also pristine and taken from such a real world it was taken from such a real world place, that it doesn't feel corny, for lack of a better word. Like you said, no special effects, no ridiculousness. Now, here's a little bit of quick trivia for you. Of those three ones that you just listed, Dracula, the Wolfman, and Frankenstein, which one of those three is not based off a novel?
Wolfman.
Correct. Yes.
Yep.
Dracula's Bram Stoker. Frankenstein is Mary Shelley. Wolfman is the only one that is an original, what's it called, property that is not. It's based off, I believe, some folklore, but it is not based off of an
So
already established, existing work.
So I looked into that. What they did was they really had a grasp on lycanthropy, the way it's been presented throughout history. They studied their Greek mythology, the English folklore, but it was kind of ripe for the picking for Hollywood to take it and run with it, and there wasn't any real substantial source material to adapt. So that's the most impressive of the three for me because you're right. These classics, they established the rules. Nothing's changed. I mean, just look at what we do in the shadows, the most recent big
Exactly.
vampire fanfare. It's using the same playbook that Dracula gave us, almost 100 years
Even to
ago
a
now,
point where it's
90
still
years
pulling
ago.
designs, even to the point where it's still pulling designs from like the original Nosferatu as well, with certain of the designs for its characters.
Yeah, exactly. Even the visual look. And all of them, the visual look, really. The way we show horror on screen, the way filmmakers make creative choices, so much of it comes from these movies. And that's why I love a movie like Young Frankenstein, because what Mel Brooks is doing in that movie is showing the playbook to you. But also, I think at the same time as he's parodying it, he's clearly a student of classic horror because he gets it so right that that's why it's funny. But I think also he's showing you the beauty of it because his parody is so good only because he knows what has come before him so in depthly that he can parody it in a way that's fulfilling. But before we get into that, if you wanted to go into that, because that's another one I recently watched, I do think, speaking to the larger point, yes, those classics, I'm really glad that it panned out for me this way in my film development, just because of the fact that it's just we've gone so far. Special effects have given us so much more that we can do with horror, but really, if you boil it down, it all kind of goes back to the rules we established with these early movies, and it's really
Yeah.
fascinating to see.
It's kind of funny how that works, right? Again, we talk all the time about like rules of slasher and all of that. And like recently, like I've been breaking down for like some of my friends and like on some of the TikToks and some of the videos that I've been doing, kind of like the history of horror within movies, where again, even though there has been a long history of horror kind of and how it has been presented in movies, what's so fascinating to me about the horror genre, and I also brought this up on our Halloween Ends episode, is how for the longest time Hollywood was always trying to figure out how to present it, because they knew that people liked this stuff and they knew that it made money, but they never really kind of took it seriously. Again, I feel like what's so interesting about those early movies is that they are essentially classified as like camp fare. It's like, okay, it's very B level. It's not worthy of like, the real production. It's not really like pristine. And then you had guys like George A. Romero who came around in the 60s and really changed all that up. So it was always around the fringes, but it was never really given, for lack of a better word, like the mainstream Hollywood treatment. And what's so interesting is about the 70s is, again, we give Halloween all the credit in the world for starting the slasher genre, as well as movies like The Omen, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But what's interesting about that is, I don't think, even more so than, there's another movie that came out that I think is even more important than Night of the Living Dead, which kind of kicks off the whole zombie genre in the 60s. Because as good as those movies are, your Night of the Living Deads, fun fact, Dawn of the Dead doesn't come out until almost a full 20 years after Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead is 61. Dawn of the Dead does not come out until 78. So there's a long period of time in between there where it's like, okay, what was happening with horror movies and all of that? And there was one movie that came out that was like the turning point when Hollywood was like, okay, now we can actually like really start to invest in this because it's pristine. And I want to see if you can guess what movie that was.
What movie that was, man?
Yeah. I'll give you a hint. It
You
was in the
got me here.
70s. It was before, it predates Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It predates The Omen. It predates Halloween. It predates Hills Have Eyes. So it's before all of them.
Before all of them. I mean, I
And it's
know it's not
probably,
Silence of the Lambs.
no, it is not. And it's probably, I would put it up there as far as like with The Shining, as far as like being like one of the most famously well-known and parodied horror movies to this day.
The Exorcist?
Yes, you got it.
Okay.
The Exorcist.
Okay,
The
gotcha.
Exorcist.
Yeah, no. I watched an amazing documentary about someone at the time, really heads up play, by the way. I don't know if you've ever seen this. Someone at the time realized the impact it was having on audiences and the pop culture, and they started shooting a documentary of people as they went into the theater and as they came out of
The
the theater.
Exorcist. Exactly. I know exactly which
Yeah,
documentary
you
you're talking
saw
about, and
that?
I'm
It's
pretty
wild,
sure.
right?
And I'll tell you
No,
why.
I
Because
haven't seen that one yet.
Okay, but the reason why that one is just as equally as important as the movie itself is because I'm pretty sure they're both directed by the same guy. Because William Friedkin, the director of The Exorcist, is also an incredibly important filmmaker in history. He directed The French Connection, what's called a very underrated movie, Sorcerer. This movie, Bug, what's called Cruising, was a very underrated movie with Al Pacino. He's an excellent filmmaker. But what's so interesting is and what's so interesting about his film style is he started out as a documentarian. So his whole thing is he kind of really was so in, along with Coppola, with The Godfather, he was also incredibly instrumental as far as the film movement of the 70s, the decade that we always go back to as far as, all of the film trends that we kind of follow up to this day. Again, there's all the big names that came out of that decade, your Coppola's, your Spielberg's, your Lucas's, your Scorsese's, all that. But then there's always like the underrated ones that flew under the radar, like your De Palmas, and William Friedkin is one of them. So in order to kind of break down the timeline for you, William Friedkin is one of a couple of up-and-coming filmmakers that's working on the fringes of Hollywood throughout the 60s. He puts out a movie called The French Connection with Gene Hackman in 71, which wins all the Oscars. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Gene Hackman. It's a big thing. It's, it's another like, kind of dirty cop going after, some smugglers, all that stuff. So that movie wins. So then he takes an interest in this novel. I believe the author of the novel is William Peter Blatty, who I believe was a priest. I would have to look that up, and a couple of people are probably going to have to fact check me on this. But what's interesting about his approach to it is that, again, people would call him revolutionary for this, but I would argue that he wasn't necessarily doing anything different than Romero and any of the other guys before him were doing, which again is going back to your whole point about film history and understanding film history, which is that he took it from a realist perspective. And what's so interesting about the idea of your point about it, the documentary of people's reactions to The Exorcist, is because at the time in the 70s, religion was still had a very, very big impact. So the idea of, the villain, for lack of a better word, being a demon, a figure of hell, that had a very, very marked effect on people. And the way that they pitched it, as far as, again, the ultimate evil coming in to take over the form of the ultimate form of innocence, that being this little girl who unintentionally got possessed without even realizing it. But it's all of the stuff around the movie as well that goes into it that makes it so influential. Where her mother is a single working actress, who is a single mother trying to support her child. The one priest, the younger one, Father Karras, is one who, again, is having a major identity crisis because his mother is dying. So he's got all of this inner conflict and turmoil when he's summoned in order to deal with this evil. The older priest, the Max von Sydow priest, who, fun fact, Max von Sydow was so young at the time, but he was so good in the role that they literally had to put old age makeup on him. So even though it looks like Max von Sydow hadn't aged in 40 years. He passed away recently. He was much younger than he was in the movie. The fact that he is almost kind of been like on this search in order to deal with this evil for so long that he kind of can't see and has kind of lost his ability to understand and have respect for the evil that he is dealing with. All of these different little touches that go into it in order to just kind of elevate it and make it bigger. And the movie, I believe, is the first ever horror movie to be nominated for Best Picture. It didn't win. It lost out to George Roy Hill's The Sting that year because it was pushing right in between the first two Godfathers. But it is the first mainstream horror movie. It was, I believe, the highest grossing movie of 1973. And that movie got so much money and so much acclaim that people were like, okay, now we got to start really investing in these because this proves people are going to come out to watch it. And that's what leads to Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 year later. 2 years later, you get The Omen. 1 year after that, you get The Hills Have Eyes, which is the beginning of Wes Craven's career. And then 1 year after that, you got Halloween, and the rest is history, So that's why, again,
the 70s were huge for horror. The first wave is obviously those films we started off talking about. Yes. The 40s, the 30s, which I think you could say ends with Psycho in the early 50s. I believe 51.
1960 actually is Psycho.
1960? Okay. Yeah. I think we kind of establish the ending there. And then we kind of have a few years, I think we simmer on it, we think on it, and then we clearly have the resurgence.
And it's kind of interesting that you bring up Psycho, too, because obviously in addition to many other influences, Carpenter also cited Psycho as a very, very big influence for Halloween as well. So that kind of shows,
Psycho's an interesting horror one for me because it's so foundational. It establishes so much of what we think of the psychological angle that comes into horror, but nothing about it.
Because it's not framed like a horror movie. It's framed more like a mystery thriller almost. And that's what's so interesting about it.
I think what I'm trying to say is it's whereas Wolfman I can see at the time, or Dracula or Frankenstein at the time being terrifying to audiences because it's something so surreal, something that there's no way they could think of, and something only possible because of the way that Hollywood is quite literally showing these people something for the first time that only lived in one man's head or one woman's head until it was projected, similar to the Great Train Robbery, where the train's literally coming at them and people in theaters were jumping out of the way because they thought a train was coming at them because no one had ever seen a filmed train from that angle. I think what Psycho does, though, we're not putting a mask on or we're not putting makeup on. We're just showing you how horrifying the person sitting to your left or right in the theater could potentially be for the first time. And that, to me, is like the craziest thing that our society ever had to go through, because Psycho rewrites the rules. It rewrites the rules of more than just the horror genre.
Many different ways. That's the first time you ever see a toilet flushing on screen. It breaks every single rule in the Hays Code up to that point, which for those of you who don't know, that for the longest time, about 30, 40 years in Hollywood, at the beginning of Hollywood, and this kind of goes away in the 60s, you have this thing called the Hays Code, which is basically essentially this set of written rules. It's not even unwritten, written rules that prevented. So couples, forget sex on screen. They were not even allowed to share the same bed on screen. You were not allowed to see a toilet flushing. Obviously, any signs of violence or anything like that, And Hitchcock breaks every single one of those rules with Psycho. It's the first time you see a toilet flushing on screen. Believe it's the first time you ever see a person not just dying on screen, but you see the source of their death and the way that he's able to get around that with all the cuts by actually like cutting with all the quick cuts and cutting in between the actual stabs, the sound effects with, again, I think they like stabbed a knife into like different kinds of like melons in order to simulate the sounds, I don't remember what they used.
It was a head of lettuce.
Not to mention, again, it's the first time ever where, again, and this also is where Scream comes in too, because Scream pulled this as well from this movie, where they kill off the main character in the opening scene in the movie. What's her name? I can't remember her name, but what's it called? Jamie Lee Curtis's mother, Janet Leigh. Her character
Right.
dies.
Right.
She is
Right.
the
Right.
main character. She's the inciting incident of that movie when she flees with her money. And again, it's another one of those kind of the terminology that the internet has come up with, where again it starts off as one movie, then shifts into another, and that's before you even get into the whole multiple personality disorder, which it's like, again, that kind of touches on like a little bit of like the mental illness thing, which we know was like not even known about in the 60s. It's like, so that's one of the things that they kind of stumbled on without even realizing. But it's like, had that been in a movie before at that point?
Obviously not. And I think that's a great, your description of the Hays Code and going through the history there is really poignant, because decorum went out the window with that movie. Like, we really established the rule of courtesy as far as what we were going to think about showing audiences and how we were going to go about making films after Psycho. And I think horror is kind of a product of the times. I think the reason we didn't have much horror in the 50s is because, well, like, times were really good. Like, the economy was great back then. We had just gotten out of World War II. It was a very positive time. And then the 60s come around and we're in Korea, and it's like, oh, we're back at war. Bit of discourse, the hippie movement was an anti-establishment movement, and I think horror is reflective of the times. I feel like the reason we're getting so many gruesome horror films right now, look around, people are a bit unhappy, depending on who you ask, and either side of the aisle is equally as unhappy, I would say. I think it's a very interesting social commentary, but I think, again, looking at it from the older films, someone's got to set the domino moving to start. And then Psycho said, "Okay, you're moving at like 3 miles an hour. Let's kick this to 10." And then from there, velocity and force just take those and keep them moving faster and faster and faster. We hit The Exorcist and it keeps going. So horror to me isn't, that's why I like watching horror year round, because its importance isn't just around Halloween. Obviously, that's like when it's most fun to talk about it, and as podcasters, that's when you have a great opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah.
But this conversation can happen any time of the year, and I think that's what's so cool about what this genre has done. And yeah, I love what you're bringing to the table with all this. I know it's a bit all over the place, but you're making me think about it from ways that I haven't before.
Well, it's
And I'm
it's
sort of
interesting
speaking through a
because,
thought process. But yeah, go
well,
ahead. I'm sorry.
it's interesting because I've never. It's weird because people like always say Halloween. It's like, okay, I got my movie list. I'm gonna go watch one horror movie a day, and it's like, I don't know, like, that's always so limiting to horror. It's like you're only gonna watch it like one time of the year. It's like horror is such an expansive genre that I have learned in only like the last couple of years cover so many different genres. From psychological thrillers to creature features to paranoid, claustrophobic thrillers to being, allegories for real world issues, which, as we know, has given us some of the best horrors. One of your favorites you talk about all the time, Invasion of the Body Snatchers and such. And I've realized that some of my favorite movies that I didn't even think of as horror movies, still technically qualify in the genre. Like Silence of the Lambs, I never would have thought of as being a horror movie, and yet somehow it qualifies, as that. So that's why whenever I'm thinking of like what my favorite quote unquote, especially when someone asks me like scary movies, that's the term a lot of people like to use, not horror movies. I always have a tough time thinking of it because like there's a lot of movies that scare me but don't qualify as horror movies. And also the idea also of like me being scared by visual imagery, I think, is a kind of a moot point at this point, because we all know as we grow older, the things that scare us when we're younger are not necessarily the same things that scare us when we get older. And there are things that certainly scare me a lot more now about other movies that would, just as far as like, subtext, let's call it, for me, is usually the scariest thing in movies, depending on what the movie is going to be about. You know exactly what I'm referencing. But
Totally.
yeah, like for example, like when I this past summer I was doing a Kubrick rewatch because I hadn't watched his movies in a while, and I kicked it off with The Shining, and I'm like, I think the most fascinating thing about that movie had nothing to do with it being a horror movie or the King stuff, the Kubrick stuff, any of this stuff, the normal stuff that goes into it. But I think what was so fascinating about the Kubrick rewatch is it was the first time I'd watched any of those movies post-COVID. And now with like kind of the knowledge of COVID and like those feelings of like that isolation, that claustrophobia, that unknowing about what the state of the world is going to be, it just added so much more context to movies, not only like The Shining, but like A Clockwork Orange, like Lolita, like what's it called? What are some other big ones? Like Full Metal
Well, hang on.
Jacket.
What about, in my opinion, which isn't a horror movie, but it's like you said, I think because we've pushed the boundaries, we've taken what was once proper decorum and etiquette and completely threw it out the window, because that's what artists do, especially filmmakers.
Yep, the good ones at least.
The good ones. Think about how terrifying, you know, oh,
You muted.
Kubrick's space film.
2001.
2001. I'm sorry, I was just completely zoning out on that one. How scary is Hal? I mean, come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
That
Oh
thing
my
was terrifying.
God. Oh my
And
God. Like even and like the crazy thing is that's stuff that people have been commenting on for like the last decade now, but even more so like with the advancement of work in AIs, that all the stuff that's been going on, it's like Jesus Christ. Like
it only gets more terrifying as
it
time goes on.
only gets more terrifying as time goes on. You know what's
And
crazy too? Did you know that they made a sequel to 2001?
Okay, who?
You would think it sounds like the craziest, stupidest idea ever, but it's actually
Yeah,
I've seen
sounds
bits of it.
terrible.
It's actually not bad. It's
Okay, but this isn't
actually
Kubrick
not bad.
canon. There's no way Kubrick approved of this.
No, I believe it was done, but I believe that what happened was it was not Kubrick. So the way that the origin story for 2001 goes
No,
is that Kubrick.
it's called Ad Astra, starring Brad Pitt. We went and saw it.
Close enough, but no, no, it's the person who wrote the novel. Basically, what happened was that Kubrick got commissioned the rights to the manuscript with the author Arthur C. Clarke, so they were kind of writing the book and the screenplay at the same time, if memory serves. And Arthur C. Clarke
right,
then wrote a sequel to it that was called 2010. About basically what happens is that it's a rescue expedition that's going out in order to try and find out what happened to the original crew that Hal was maintaining. And they go into like kind of what's so interesting about it is they sort of kind of explain what happened with the whole going into the vortex and the space baby and the black obelisks and where they come from, but they don't over explain it, if that makes any sense. It's really cool and fascinating. Again, it's not Kubrick canon, but just as like, kind of giving a little bit of extra context to something that's already a masterpiece, if it's done well, I never fault that, So that's why, again, it's not the worst thing ever, but it is definitely an interesting watch. I found out about it. Like I think it was on like top 10 lists of sequels that nobody knows even existed or something like that. Like they also made like they made a sequel to Chinatown too. They made a sequel to Chinatown called The Two Jakes.
I didn't, and I guess that's why that list exists.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Hilarious.
It's crazy. The amount of movies that I'm like, these got sequels? What? Like, it's mind blowing to me.
Jeez, dude, that's hilarious. But Dom, listen.
Yeah.
We can go on about this all night. So I do want to get this point out before we get too far.
Please
Video
do.
games. The video game industry does a great job of saying something. They have different titles. There's something on Steam, all the big retailers. Horror-like. So if you think about horror-like, to me, Hal comes to mind, right? 2001. I think of Alien.
Yes.
Alien. Is it sci-fi? Is it horror? Is putting one label on it appropriate when it does so much more? Predator, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And so I think, thank God filmmakers started taking horror and messing with the psyche seriously.
Yes. I agree. And what's so interesting, real quick, to go off of horror, to go off of Predator for a second, it's so interesting that you bring that up because what makes Predator work so well. People have talked about this a lot, and I'm going to blow your mind with this right now. So, fun fact, Predator does not actually have as big of a budget as you would think, right? So it's shot by John McTiernan, who is a legend in the action genre filmmaking. He directed Die Hard the year after Predator. Then 2 years after Die Hard, he does Hunt for Red October. Then he does Last Action Hero in the middle of the 90s with Arnold, which all three of those are revolutionary in their own right. Die Hard makes Bruce Willis a star and kind of transitions us into the 90s, which is where, okay, more, for lack of a better word, working class action star. So no, you don't need like the gung-ho, roided out monsters from the 80s. You get like more like casual, normal looking action stars. And then Last Action Hero is arguably like kind of the most meta movie, but before people knew what meta stuff was. So it's like you have characters going in and out of movie screens. Yeah. It's great.
Face Off.
Last Action Hero is like definitely one that I would recommend. I watched that this past year. But so he directs Predator. And what's so interesting about Predator is that it's adapting a slasher formula and grafting that onto an action. Like you have these gung ho, roided out monsters of men that are blowing the hell out of the jungle in Central America. You know, they're like, you want to pull off a stealth Black Ops mission. Oh, who are we going to get? Arnold Schwarzenegger, Carl Weathers, Jesse the Body Ventura, Sonny Landham. It's like all these guys who are like seemingly in a competition is like, okay, who's got the bigger dick here, you know? And then you drop them in the middle of the jungle. You have to do one crazy action sequence. There's really only one nutso, like super destructive action sequence with a lot of the typical 80s explosive stuff. And then you put them up against a force that is the ultimate hunter. And it just starts picking them off one by one in a very slasher-esque formula. It's kind of brilliant how it's pulled off. It's kind of insane. I've watched so many video essays on it that break it down entirely, and it added a whole new context to that movie where it's like, wow, okay, Predator is actually not just another like dumb action movie that's got some good kills. This is actually like a really well thought out and really smart, intelligent movie, you know?
Totally, man. And I think, again, to speak to the overall sentiment of this conversation, it knows the history that came before it. It understands the rules, and then once you understand the rules, you can break them, a la a John Landis in American Werewolves of London, knew what the Wolfman had provided, the history of lycanthropy and cinema had given him, and so he took it and turned it on its side. And I think, hey, horror is, in my opinion, just to kind of like begin to wrap my thoughts up here in this conversation, I think while film has been something that, you know, we've been talking about being a little underwhelming in recent years, specifically this year so far. I don't know if your opinion's changed on that, but certainly from what I've seen, at least, although not the largest sample size, still hasn't left me thinking about it, chewing on it like past years of recent cinema have. Horror is one of the things, though, that I think is in good hands. Like if you look at what
Yeah.
A24 cranks out, if you look at, I mean, Jason Blum and what he's done for the genre, and then of course there's like Neon and other studios too that will bring you like a great movie every few years. I'm a little less worried about horror as a
Yeah.
whole than
And
I
this
am
year has
as
been a
Hollywood as a whole,
I
you
agree. And
know?
this year has been, a lot of people have been pointing this out. This year has been a fantastic year for horror movies, just in general. Again, Jordan Peele's Nope, Ty West and his double feature of X and Pearl. What's it called? There's that movie that came out last month, Barbarian, which a lot of people are going nuts about, that just went on HBO Max. I might watch that tonight, actually, because I've heard that movie's fantastic. Yeah, just horror is in a really, really great place right now. And I think that if we could end the conversation on with anything, it is that. But I just wanted to leave off with in order to kind of tie up this spooktacular, Chris, I wanted to know, what is your greatest horror movie watching experience? And there are a couple caveats to this. This doesn't necessarily have to be the scariest movie that you've ever seen. This doesn't necessarily have to be, the worst movie. It can be any horror movie that you watch that technically meets the qualifications, and you had a very, very memorable experience with it. Because I've got mine, but I want to hear what yours is.
You know mine.
I know, but I want you to say it again.
When we watched Climax in your basement, I
Oh,
mean,
that's the one.
yeah, dude, my heart was pumping. I could not believe it. It was so masterful at just making me feel tense, uneasy, and just a great horror movie. Any movie that is meant to cause tension will have you wishing it was over and then wanting it back the second it ends.
Yes.
And that is exactly what that movie did. It was the greatest viewing experience. We chilled, we relaxed. You almost got me too relaxed before you
A
put
little
on
bit too
this.
real. Almost intentionally so, because I knew
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, it's got to be that. And then I think an honorable mention might be when we did a first time watch for Silence of the Lambs, because that was a lot of
Yes.
fun. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed, kind of like, doing the first time watches are cool because when we would do them, it was like you always had the facts and the information, so it's like watching it with commentary but for the first time. So it really enriched the experience. But my
Yeah.
in person was definitely Climax, and then my honorable mention is watching that terrible Saw movie with you and Pat
Oh
about a year
yeah,
and a half
that
ago.
was,
Just
oh
how
my
bad it was
god.
and
No,
fun that was.
but here, so here was what was great is me and Pat comment. This is always like when I have so much fun during a bad movie, and this is why bad movies, they have their place in the canon. Is because a great bad movie will provide arguably sometimes a better experience than a great good movie. Because when you have two people that are just talking throughout the entire movie, but like their commentary is funnier than the movie itself. Like apparently this actually happened where in 2019 when the sequel to Happy Death Day to You came out, a friend of mine, I was seeing it, a couple of friends of mine, we just ended up meeting up at the theater, you know, in Oswego. And that movie was so terrible that my friends literally just ended up looking at me and they were watching me watch the movie because apparently my commentary and me being angry at the movie was funnier and more entertaining than the movie itself, which, you know, I always love when people do that. But my greatest horror movie experience that I've watched easily to this day, it's just masterful. So I'd already seen this movie, and I think I told you about this movie before, but I've told you to watch it like endlessly. Is you know, the '90s classic From Dusk Till Dawn. You know, 1996. Rodriguez and Tarantino writing the script. Tarantino's also starring in the movie, which you think would be an absolute travesty, but he's George Clooney's brother in the movie. They're outlaws on the run, and they end up hijacking a family's RV in order to get into Mexico in order to meet up with their contact, and they go to a bar, and pandemonium ensues because it turns out that the bar is run by vampires, and I have never seen a quicker paradigm shift towards a movie, and so I'd already seen it, and I already knew how great it was, but I was seeing this girl in spring of 2021, and it was my turn to pick the movie when we were hanging out, and I picked From Dusk Till Dawn. Because I'm like, I don't know what made me choose it at all. I saw that it was streaming on a thing that we could watch, and I'm like, this seems like it'll be a fun time. And that ended up being such a blast because watching her reaction to it, because she didn't hate it, but she also didn't really know what to make of it. So she was just kind of like having a ball just watching it. And I was just losing my mind, just having an absolute blast watching because I love the movie so much. I was just waiting. I'm like, you know, I was tensing around. I'm like, okay, this is okay. Just wait. Then there would be a crazy thing that happened. And I'm like, yeah. And then we ended up hooking up afterwards. And it was just, it was a great time. It was an absolutely great time. One of my favorite horror movies, one of my favorite vampire movies in general. That's a movie that, like, you know, when Twilight almost quite, you know, pun intended, sucked the life out of the vampire genre for a while, you know, and those are the movies that you need to watch in order to remind yourself, oh yeah, vampires can be, you know, cool, badass, funny, violent, scary, you know, what vampires are supposed to be, you know. I'll also say that the Fright Night remake as well with Colin Farrell, while not great, is also still mildly entertaining as well.
Cool. Hell yeah, man. I think this was a great discussion about horror, the
Yes.
history, a little bit of celebrating and talking about some fun experiences we've had. This is a great time, man. I really had a good.
I had a great time. Again, we always have a great time whenever we're talking about Halloween. It's one of our favorite times of the year. So people, that was it. That was our Halloween Spooktacular episode. This will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts tomorrow or today if you're listening to it on there. So be sure to follow us on both of those sites as well. We'll be back next week. Next week's another one of a little bit of a fun one. You know, like I said, we had a little bit of a break time in between, you know, we don't cover as much of the Oscar bait movies on here anymore until around like Oscar time. So like I said, we're taking these next 2 weeks in order to have some fun as a break between the blockbusters before Black Panther comes out next week. And so next one, we're doing a little bit of a fun one. This one, like I said, is another one for us. You know, we're doing the Weird Al biopic starring Daniel Radcliffe, which is just the fact that movie exists just in general. I'm like, okay, this movie feels like it was made for us. We have to watch this. So yeah, this one, it's going to be a good one to say the least. So we'll be back next week doing that. Chris, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Guys, you can find me on all the major social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at Christian Evanko. Evanko spelled Evanko. And go and listen on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, and all the other major streaming services to my music at Christian Evanko. Evanko spelled Evanko. Thank you guys so much, and I can't wait to see you next week.
Absolutely, of course. And be sure to follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to follow the official Talking TV podcast across all platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok as well. Like I said, I'm going to get the rest of those TikToks out at some point tomorrow just as well. So be sure you guys tune in to all of that and more. And as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. See you guys next time.